We are live. Welcome to the Room Show. How you doing, Dan?
Excellent. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Doing good. I appreciate you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for the people on my platform that don't know, you're a radio personality. I love interviewing radio personalities because I do radio too. And
Awesome.
how long have you been in radio, and when did you get started?
So this was going into my 22nd year in radio, actually. So I started the original. It's kind of an interesting story. So when I was a kid, of course, I was listening to the radio like everybody else, and I got my first FM tuner and fell in love with radio and had my parents drive me to the radio station to get bumper stickers, and I would call up the night DJ and send out requests to my babysitters. And I think when I was 10, I would call the radio station and be like, "Oh, can I have a job?" And they're like, "No, you're 10, so you can't do that." And I was like, "Okay." Then fast forward a couple of years, I decided I wanted to do something with my life and went into media. And at first was like, "Oh, let's go into TV." So I was like, "Let's learn how to use the shoot camera and do the behind the scenes stuff." And then in college, I went to CSU Pueblo. They were, as part of the TV program, you also had to take a radio class. And I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. And I did commercial production, as a project. And the instructor called me in and said, you're pretty good at this. You ever thought about a career in radio? And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. He's like, no, let's put you on the college radio station. And so I started at 3 a.m. In October of 2003. And it was a hardcore hip hop and R&B station. And at the time, my idea of hip hop was like the thong song. So I was in for quite a shock when I'm playing 50 Cent and Tupac and all this stuff. But I loved it. I thought it was great. And then I just decided, this would be cool to have as a career. Never really thought, at the time when you're 19 years old, you don't really think about what you're going to be doing in 25 years. But I ended up turning into a full-fledged 21-year career that I'm still proud to be in today.
Nice. That's a great story. So basically they just threw you in a jungle and you didn't know fully what was going to happen.
Yeah, that's kind of how it's always been my entire career. So, the first entry into commercial radio was in 2004 when I interned for then Clear Channel Communications in Colorado Springs, and I was a promotions guy. And my job wasn't the sexiest job. It was cleaning out the prize closets, getting the vans washed, making sure they had gas, stuff that needed to get done. But stuff that you're like, okay, when do I get to get on the air? And then I also took TV as well. So I wanted to, because I was like, okay, let's keep my options open, TV or radio. One of those is gonna hire me. So I actually took an internship the next year at a TV station, and on the morning camera crew, 4 a.m. to noon. And one morning, one of the camera guys didn't show up. He overslept, and so they just threw me on a camera. And because of that, they were like, "Oh, he knows how to do this too." Which basically got me my first job after graduation because radio wasn't hiring yet. I got a job at a TV station working the morning camera from 4 a.m. to noon, and did that for a year. As soon, like 2 days after graduation, while I started working on my radio career more and trying to get into that business, which took about a year after graduation to finally find the right position that would open up.
Nice. So basically, before you got into radio, you got into TV first, and you was a camera guy.
Yeah, because I always, I've always loved media, everything, TV, radio, web design, all that stuff. So I really tried to master all of that while I was in college. I took web design, I took interactive media studies. I wanted to be a media everything. I never did a lot of on-camera work, mainly because for my personality, I really wanted to be a game show host. I never wanted to be a news guy. Or I'd be the weather guy that goes out, and goes to all the barbecues and stuff, and the world's largest ball of twine showcasing or something like that. Which the opportunity really didn't present itself for game show hosts, as I never really wanted to leave the state of Colorado just because my family's here, a lot of friends here. I really wanted to work my way up. Staying here in Colorado. And it took a little longer. It takes longer than most people because with radio, usually you have to move around. You can climb that ladder a little quicker if you move around, but I just didn't, Colorado's beautiful. So I just wanted to stick around and just keep doing that. But TV is, it's something I haven't given up on. It's not really something I actively look into. The radio job keeps me pretty busy. I also own a side DJ business as well. So between those two things, it's pretty busy to do anything else. But if someone comes along and they're like, "Hey, we want you to audition for this," sure, let's talk.
Right. So coming from you, basically a radio legend, media legend, um, been in it for a while. You went through a couple of obstacles and you didn't start where you wanted to. You started like, you kept your options open, but you started in a different way that you
Mhm.
wanted to. Um, how did you stay motivated and like how did you just keep the drive to like, okay, if I gotta do this to get to that, I'm just gonna do it.
Lot of motivation and a lot of patience. It's tough. There were times probably by year 1 or 2 where I'm like, why am I not on a morning show? Why am I not getting paid 6 figures? Because once you get into the business, you start to discover other people that are in the business that really, I don't want to say they're not good, but they don't work as hard as you. They may not have come up through the same ranks as you, but they're doing better than you. They're more successful than you, and that can be tough. But that's any business that involves casting, TV and movies are like that as well. Actors in Hollywood, there's people that get passed over for parts that are more than qualified, but the other person gets the part because for some reason they knew someone or they had some kind of edge that the regular person didn't have. And that's the problem with radio is that it's a very thankless business, especially when you're moving up in the business, because you've got to work really hard. You've got to get to know just the right people. You've got to be humble in some situations when you really may not want to be. Sometimes you'll have to do things that you really don't want to do. Um, but I can say, as a true testament, if you put up with a lot of the BS and navigate just the right moves and have, the right place, right time, it can work out. It's not like that for everyone, though. It depends on what part of the country you're in. For me, it was easy because I went to college in Pueblo, which was at the time was like market 253. Then I moved up to Colorado Springs, which at the time was market 97, I think, 94 or 97. And then I just went an hour up the road to Denver, which was market 18 when I got here. So it worked out to where it was like boom, boom, boom. But if you're somebody who's, living in a state that maybe is a little less populated, the opportunities may not be there. So you can kind of give best practices as how to make your way in the business. I would say one of the best things is just making relationships with people, getting to know everybody, because this business, if people like you, they will be more inclined to hear what you have to say. And if they've already met you, then you're kind of creating that instant connection that they're like, oh yeah, I remember meeting this guy, this part-time intern guy, but now we have a position open and he seemed good back then, so let's give him a shot now. Because you never really know who you're going to end up meeting that can help you out later. So, and that's just true in any business, real estate, anything that involves talking, making relationships with people that could pay off later on. Sometimes it's all about the long game. There's guys I've worked with now that I remember reaching out to a long time ago, and they didn't really know who I was. And they did, so they were like, okay, well, let's talk to you in a couple of years. And now I work with them every day as if we've always worked together, because you never really know. So I think it's just an attitude thing where how badly do you want to work in this business? But you also have to balance it at the same time where you don't want to be taken advantage of. And unfortunately radio is a business that there's a lot more supply than demand. That's the challenge. There's a lot of people that want to work in this business, but the jobs are much fewer and far between than they were 5, 10, 20 years ago. So now it's all about networking on top of the talent, being in the right place at the right time, at just the right opportunity. And, the other thing too is that not every, it's all about your situation. A colleague told me this years ago where, everyone thinks, oh, I want to move to New York City. It's market 1. Yes, but you may get to New York City and you may be making $70,000 a year, which means you're going to have to live an hour outside the city and commute 2 hours every day. and it may not be exactly as glamorous as what you're thinking. Whereas you may get a job in Fayetteville, Arkansas, that is a local owner and pays you a good living with a low cost of living around the area. You're the big fish in the small pond, and it could be great. So it's really, you can't look at the market size necessarily. You have to look at what is your life situation, what is your life goal, because bigger market doesn't always mean bigger pay. I know there was a story recently about KLOS hiring an afternoon show, and that they were looking at paying $75,000 a year, which is, I think a lot of people would agree that's not really enough to be able to live in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah.
But that's the job. So whereas you may go to, it's based on the owner, it's based on the company's finances, based on the station's revenue, all that stuff. Whereas you may go to a smaller town like Allentown, maybe there's a local radio station there with a local owner that still pays really well. You never really know. So it's more about your situation, not necessarily the market size. Sometimes it can work out. Sometimes you move up in market size, you make more money. But you got to look at the big picture. What are your life goals? Do you want to be known as a famous radio personality, or do you want to be known as a great dad or a great husband, a great wife? Sometimes you can mesh both of those together, but you really have to look at the big picture, and you have to do it starting in your 20s, because your priorities in your 20s are very different than your 40s. So you almost have to look ahead and be like, okay, what do I want to do with this? How's this going to work?
Right. Good tips. Those are That's right on.
Yeah.
So yeah. In that situation, right? Because that's a good point that you said, depending on your situation. Say you could work for a bigger market, but they pay less, and you have like a different job, but it's not media.
Mm-hmm.
But you have your own podcast. You're doing your own thing, your own grind on the side. What would you go with if you're doing it? The job that you have is not media, but you're still able to like create when you're not working at that job.
There's a lot of opportunities, especially with remote work now, to work in media in some way. Every radio person has a side hustle, and the side hustle is really, you make money and it can be related to media. For example, I have my own DJ company where I host weddings and parties. It's just me, but it makes a really good extra amount of side money. And it's DJing, it's similar to the radio. You're finding out which songs make people react a positive way. You're putting them in an order. You're hosting events, just like in radio, just like hosting promotions. You're hosting an event. There are a lot of people I know that they can become professional MCs, where their job is people pay them to show up at corporate events and just host the event. Honestly, that's a great gig. If you can get it, if it's a steady thing, and you build your name up, because that's what people need. Because a lot of people can't do that. That's why, I always see people when they want to, brides will be like, "Oh, do we really need a DJ? Can we just have a friend make the announcements?" I'm like, "Nah, it's a little more than that." Like, when you're hosting an event, it's a specialized skill. It's all about knowing what to say, knowing what not to say, speaking clearly, good mic technique. Being able to control a crowd, being able to get people to react to what you're saying, which can be difficult for somebody who's not trained in that. Because if you're not speaking with presence and authority, people aren't going to listen to you. So that's one option. There's a lot of side hustles involving voice tracking, where stations. I work for a company called Local Radio Networks as well. My main job is I work for Odyssey in Denver and Rochester, but for Local Radio Networks, it's a 24/7 format company. So basically, smaller stations all over the country in little tiny towns of 1,000 people, they will subscribe to this service, and this service will then provide them with DJs, on-air personalities, that can be in their towns at a fraction of the cost. And it's just a part-time gig on the side. Doesn't take me very long to do, but they send me all the stuff to read, and I interject my own personality into it. And these smaller towns who can't really afford to have a full air staff get a full air staff, and get a major market air staff as well. So they get people that have good voices, that have good delivery, that can connect with their local audiences from a remote location. So a lot of people in media have these multiple jobs. It's kind of like a smaller version of Ryan Seacrest. I mean, think about him. He's got his, his main job is, he hosts mornings on Kiss 1027 in LA, but he also does American Idol. He also does Wheel of Fortune. He also does appearances and nonprofit stuff. That's how you have to think. Like, you got to think like Ryan Seacrest, because if you look at yourself, we're all marketable entities. How marketable are we? That's what you get to decide. Are you somebody who can present well in front of a client? Can you get out there and become an influencer? Are you good at sales? Are you somebody that looks appealing, somebody that sounds appealing? It all comes part of your whole package, where how sellable are you? It goes to influencers. Influencers are kind of the next DJs, where they have made connections with companies to be compensated by showing off the company's products or services to their following. That's what you have to do. And you kind of have to figure out what is your most marketable skill. Fortunately, radio worked for me because that was the foundation. If you're a TV personality, radio personality, you've kind of already built a foundation to be marketable. But the marketing also can help you stay employed. It's no secret that the industry is getting much smaller. Budgets are tightening. Jobs are tightening up quite a bit. But if you're somebody who's directly connected to the money, usually they skip down that list once they get to your name. I know this firsthand, because if you're helping to bring money into the company, whether it's an endorsement on the air or a television endorsement or an influencer campaign, if you have something that's tied to the money that's coming into the radio station or the TV station, you're set for the most part. Don't put that in writing, but you should be good, because that's the thing. If you're always able to show that there's a return on investment by investing in you, then you'll work as long as you want.
Right on. I like that right there.
Yeah. And it's cool because, you have to be, it seems scary when you're starting out, but you have to think, how can you be the most, it's kind of politics. How can you be the most likable person? To the biggest audience? When you're running a politician, you want to run somebody who has a mass appeal, who appeals to, more than 50% of your constituents. It's the same thing with when you're a media personality. You want to appeal to a massive amount of appeal. And that's why it's people. And that's why it's tough if you're very nichey. You're only going for that niche. If you're somebody who wants to be a sports radio announcer, that's great, but you're kind of limiting yourself to only sports radio, which, if you listen to sports radio, a lot of those guys are former players. Everyone wants to work in sports radio, especially men, more women now too. But you got to be like, okay, let's say you want to work in sports radio. You just, diehard sports fan. And there's not a sports job, but there's a job as like at the station, at another station in the cluster as a sports station, but it's not necessarily what you want to do, but you could do the job. So maybe take that job first, then get to know the guys on the sports station. Before you know it, maybe they have you on once a week, just, with your takes or whatever. Then suddenly one of them leaves or gets laid off. You step up to the plate. So just because the job that you have now isn't necessarily the end game, it can be your stepping stone to the next job that you really want. For example, today, I've always wanted to be a program director. One, I love being able to control the radio station and design it and craft it and use the strategy to make it, be as profitable as possible. But I also like being the manager, where I get to, work with my talent and people that work, I don't want to say under me, they really work with me, because a good leader works with his people, almost works for his people. I work in the talent management business. So my job is to make sure that my talent has everything they need to do the best job they can possibly do. If they have to do something, I'm right there doing it with them. And that's what I love, is because there's a lot of managers that really aren't very good. There's no test to become a manager. There's no regulation to see who's a good manager. Good managers just happen. And sadly, I think, when you have a bad manager, you remember that one for the rest of your life. When you have a good manager, you remember them for the rest of your life. And I always wanted to be the one that people wanted to work for. I wanted to be the manager that I always wanted to work for. When you treat people with respect and you empower them to feel good. My local supervisor here, brilliant guy. His name's Mike Peterson, and he's a great manager where he can, he's able to. You'll go into his office upset about something, and you'll chat, and then you'll leave. Nothing really changed, but he made you feel better about it, about whatever happened. Where it's all about changing that perception to make people, because sometimes you have to deliver bad news. It's all about how you deliver the bad news or how you can help this person feel better about their, situation, which may not be great. He's very good at that. And it's a very impressive skill to be able just listen to your employees and hear how it is. So that's why people are like, what's your dream job? Honestly, my dream job is to kind of run the place at the top. I have a great relationship with the guys at the top. So I don't want to say, coming after their jobs, but maybe when they decide to retire on their own, then I could step in. But that's one of those things where the sky's the limit. I have I'm engaged currently, and it's one of those things where I never wanted to move around the country too much, but now, fortunately, with remote work and such, you can do a lot without having to move around. Sometimes you do, it really depends on where you're living, how much work you can get, how much in-person stuff you have to do. But right now, I mean, I'm pretty happy. I always knock on wood because you never really know when situations could change. But so far, it's been pretty great, and I can't say enough nice things about Odyssey. They've treated me very well. Everyone has different experiences with each company. I can only speak from mine personally, where they've really helped me grow. I've been there 8 years now. And it's one of those where I want to invest in the company and just work my way up and just keep doing that. Because so far I've seen nothing that tells me to do otherwise. So it's all about finding that perfect situation, that perfect manager. Some people may be willing to work less for someone who's a great person to work for. Because you got to think, if you're making a lot of money, but your boss is a complete a-hole, that's not really fun.
Yeah.
They can still throw more money at you, but in the long run, you're going to hate going to work.
Right.
But I'd be okay making a little less if I know that I'm working with people that are absolutely phenomenal to work with. And that's my current situation. So it works out pretty well. Current opportunity, I would say.
So it's all about like the grind, and it's like when you said keep your options
Yeah.
available. Like when I first started, you know, I was strictly on like one radio station, like hip
Mhm.
hop. But as I didn't get the job there, I'm like, I got to do more than just hip hop. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll do country, rock, Spanish, anything. And then I was always nervous to do anything TV. And then
Uh-huh.
now like the podcast is helping. So it's like I do the TV stuff too.
Yeah, and you have to go outside your comfort zone. Obviously you want to manage expectations. Like, I'm not going to go and do radio sales strictly because that's not really when you do radio sales in a big market, you're only doing sales and that's it. You're not really doing anything on air. You're not doing, you have to focus on your job, and radio sales is hard. The reward can be good, but it's hard. If you're in a smaller town, like a little tiny town, and I hate to pick on Fayetteville, Arkansas, but or Paris, Texas, or one of those spots. You do all of it. You do the sales, you do the morning show, you do the high school football games, you do all that stuff.
Mm,
Um, and you make an okay living doing that stuff. But it's one of those where I've worked every job in the industry. I've been a promotions director, I've been a production director, I'm a program director now. I learned how to, do all the grunt work. And sometimes it's still like there's still things that I'll do that apply to what I learned back 21 years ago when I was first starting out, more than you'd think, where you're like, wow, I've been doing the same thing for quite some time. Even with the automation, like we got Scott Studios when I was in college in 2006, my senior year, and I helped install it, which Scott Studios got bought by Google, and then Google sold it to White Orbit, and today it's White Orbit Automation. I've literally been on the same automation system since college. Like every company I've worked at had the same one, And you don't realize that back then, but you're like, wow, so I really learned how to use this pretty well. And you become the expert on everything. Because that's the other thing too, is if you're somebody who's not very technologically inclined, you should probably try and step that up, just because those are the people that are the backbone of the business now. Because you hear about AI coming out, more voice trackers. If you're somebody who can basically be the person that runs the AI or learns to master the AI and make it work better for you, that's going to go a long way. If you're the person who learns every music scheduling program, G Selector, Music Master, Power Gold, if you're somebody who knows how to use all of those, you're going to be able to teach that to other people, and you're going to make life easier for other people too. And that's the other thing too, is if you make your boss's life easier, uh, it's going to make it hard to ever replace you, because they're going to be like, oh, we can't get rid of Dan. We can't do this. He knows where all the bodies are buried, or he knows how to do this and all that stuff. So I think that's where you have to look and just master everything. You know, I feel like it's rare in the business for, people who want to be programmers and who also want to be the on-air talent. Because I think at some point a lot of people have to pick a lane. But there's people who can do both. I've always thought I was somebody who could navigate both. I don't think I'm an amazing personality. I think I'm a good to great personality, relatable. I think there are personalities better than I, who only focus on just their morning shows and doing the best shows they can do. But I found the way to kind of juggle both, to where you can be a great personality and program a great radio station as well, and do events and side hustles and all that. So if you can become a master in everything radio and just live and breathe it, it's really a success that can go far in for the aspiring broadcaster.
Right. And it's like a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
It is. That's the thing. Even on the worst day of radio, I'll look out the window and I'll see the construction worker lifting a girder in 25 degrees, and you're like, I feel for that guy. And you're like, that's every day for those guys. And so you have to be grateful that even a bad day in radio may be better than, a job that you may just not want and just pays the bills. That's what you got to remember. Radio's fun. You're being paid to talk or to arrange songs in an order that sounds good to people. When you dumb it down like that, it's like, it's amazing that we get paid for this, but it's valuable, and it's still very valuable. And, unfortunately, because of certain deregulation, things back in the day, some of these companies are in, financial trouble many years after that it originally happened. But it's still very valuable. Radio stations still make a lot of money. They just have, bills get bigger. It's just like us. We've got more bills to pay as we get older. Same thing with radio companies. And, if I can give any advice, a lot of people like to hate on certain radio companies, certain radio personalities. You never really know who's going to give you an opportunity. So it's always good to keep a neutral stance, neutral on almost on the side of positive, whether it's iHeartMedia or Odyssey or Cumulus or Beasley or any of these companies, you got to always try to keep a positive attitude, even if you don't work there. And some people will say, well, it's just sucking up. It's like, not really, because you never know who's going to give you your opportunity. And you don't want to have that skeleton in the closet that 10 years ago you made a disparaging comment about a company, and then they find out about it, and then they rescind your job offer, which could happen. It's like, if I owned a company, I don't want somebody working there who just badmouthed us 10 years ago. It's hard to not let the emotion get a hold of you, especially if you're the one getting let go, or if you've been let go by those people before. What you got to remember, the majority of the time, it's just business. It's numbers on a spreadsheet. There's positives and negatives to corporate radio. The positives are that, if this station's not doing well, then this station helps prop it up, and they keep it even. But some of the negatives are that, it's just so big that you may just be a number. But that's where it comes out, that you have to make yourself stand out as more than just a number. You have to get to know the people higher up. You have to get to know those people that are looking at those spreadsheets. and make sure that you're seen. Make sure they know this is what this person's doing that's above and beyond. We need to elevate this person. We can't get rid of this person, you know? And it's, again, it goes back to the relationships. You got to get to know as many people as possible, especially even if you have a job that seems stable right now, that could look very different in a year, 6 months, a year, 2 years. So get to know the other players while you're in a good situation too. Have lunches, have drinks, offer to go get coffee, with the competitor across the street. Just know these people, because if you're already teed up, let's say there's a massive RAF that has happened recently with some of the radio companies. There's a big influx of unemployed people now. Who do you think they're going to be looking at because everyone's applying for the same job, after that point. But if you've already got a relationship with that person who's doing the hiring for that job, your resume might go up to the top of the list. You may still not get the job, but they're going to remember you, and it gets you a chance to get in front of them, where the other people who didn't do the homework and did the networking and get to know people, they may not have that opportunity. Not because they're bad people, just, again, that's the thing. This is a very ruthless business, just like Hollywood. Any kind of entertainment business is difficult because everyone wants to do it. So you have to make sure that you look different than everybody else. One of the things that I did to get my job now it's on a classic rock station. It's a little different now. It's more adult hits, but in the day when I applied, it was a classic rock station, and I knew there were probably 15 other people that I knew going for it in the same city. I was like, I need something that stands out. And I actually heard about this when I was an intern that somebody else did, where I found out that the PD, the program director, really liked Jameson, because I had met her at some other event like a few months earlier, and I was like, oh, I remember she liked Jameson. So I recorded my air check onto one of those CDRs that looked like a vinyl record, because of classic rock, 70s, 80s kind of LPs. I recorded an air check, customized, of what I would sound like on the station, even with their imaging and everything. Because I did a lot of research ahead of time, and I put that CD into a little gift basket with 2 shots of Jameson, and I had little shooters, and I had the receptionist, who I had gotten to know ahead of time, deliver them to the PD with a note that said, "Hey, how about we have these shots after you give me a shot?" And obviously there was more, it takes a good interview as well, but that stood out because I don't think anyone else did something like that. And that person then remembered me in their mind. So it's doing things like that get you noticed. I've heard of people sending a pair of sneakers, and in their note it says, "Hey, I'm ready to hit the ground running," or stuff like that. Just something that stands out a little bit to whoever you're trying to work with. That just makes them go, I like that guy. We should talk to him again. Let's bring him back in. And if you're somebody, it's a business. People like to gravitate to people they like. If you walk into a room and people just gravitate towards you because you're friendly and entertaining and fun and, easy to talk to, that applies to work too. So you have to think about that. People are more willing to give people a shot that they really like. You got to play off of that empathy card a little bit, where, if they really like you, they're going to be like, oh, he's a good guy. We should, he seems to have the chops. Let's take a risk on this guy and see what happens. It doesn't always work, but it's in your arsenal. It's one of those tools that you can use to really make yourself work and, keep yourself employed.
It's got to stand out.
Yep. It's all about standing out. Because like I said, the supply and demand in radio is pretty uneven right now. There's a lot of people that want to work in the business, but the jobs just aren't there. So you have to find a way to cut through the others. And I don't want to say it's a good thing, but a lot of people don't know this kind of stuff. As a hiring person myself, I've gotten resumes that I'm just like, this person has no idea what this job is, or they didn't do their research. They didn't do their homework. They didn't, the resume is off. There's spelling errors, all this. That's pretty common. So if you just make sure you're buttoned up, you're kind of already in the top 10% of people. And then you throw in that extra little razzle dazzle to make yourself stand out, and it can pay dividends for your career.
Nice. You've been dropping a lot of gems this episode.
Yeah, a try. I enjoy sharing and talking about the industry. I mean, I'm hopefully a lifer. You know, that's the plan in radio. I'm 40 years old. We gotta get to at least 65, even though radio people never really retire. They just kind of either work a little less or they do something on the side or host events or things like that. But it's not that hard. It's really just make yourself as marketable as possible, make yourself well liked by people, and get to know as many people as possible. Go to all the trade shows. You know, Morning Show Boot Camp is one that I've been to a few times. 3 years actually. Yeah, 3 years. And that's, it doesn't necessarily, there's a lot of things there you'll learn, even if you're not on a morning show, but it's a great chance to network with people, to get to know people, to make friends with people. And again, you never know, the person that is the intern at your radio station could end up becoming the president of your company in 10 years. You never know. But guess what? They're going to remember you. And if you were nice to them, if you, treated them well, they're going to remember that. And, the biggest thing is it's very easy to get an ego in radio. We all have to have egos. You have to have an ego to do this job because you are literally getting critiqued on your personality. And if you don't have a thick ego, you won't last. But there's a difference between a healthy ego and a bad ego. A bad ego is one where you think you are better than everybody else. And even if you are, don't think like that. You should be willing to do exactly what the intern's doing because that's how you're going to be viewed. People are going to see you as a hack, I guess they could call it, where they're just like, okay, well, that guy's way overrated. Listeners have no idea what a jerk that guy is at the office or whatever.
Right.
Always be willing to treat the CEO the same as the janitor. That's the same thing. They're both very important, and don't let the ego get ahead of you. If you ever have to say, well, I'm this person, I shouldn't have to do this. No, that's not good because people aren't going to take you seriously. You're going to lose their respect. Because they're just going to be like, this guy's not saving lives. He's talking on the radio. Like, if anything, like neurosurgeons and heart surgeons, those guys can have egos because those guys are actually saving people's lives. We're just talking on the air and people happen to know us and recognize us because they can see our faces on Facebook. Treat everybody with respect, be kind to everybody. Especially because in this business, any kind of entertainment business, there's a lot of jerks. And you will run into a lot of jerks in your career. There's still a lot of misogynists, people that think women are just the laugh girl or the traffic girl. And that's not really today's radio. You have to rise above that. You have to blow it off. You have to be like, okay, well, that's great. I'm going to keep doing the best job I can do and not worry about it. But the ego is something you really have to keep in check because if you let it get away from you, you can turn into that jerk real fast. I've been guilty of that, in my career. Not usually. I feel like usually someone will check me on it. Someone will tell me that they're like, okay, you're being a little jerk about this. But there's times that I can remember that I'm just like, really, because nobody respects that. You just look like a moron, and they're just like, who's this guy think he is? You don't ever want to be that guy. You don't want to be the guy that says like, I expect this from my interns. I expect to be given this. No, go get your own coffee, that kind of stuff. Just always keep that ego in check because people will remember the good person. And again, it's how you want to be remembered at the end of our time on this earth. You want to be remembered as the amazing radio personality? Do you want to be remembered as the really great guy that, somebody got to work with or who made someone else's life better? That's how you have to look at that. Just me, just my 2 cents. Other people may say otherwise, but it's worked pretty well in my career. And it's the model that I'm going to keep doing for the rest of my career because it's easier to, what's the phrase? Easier to catch more bees with honey than vinegar or whatever. I think I messed that up, but it's easier if you're sweet to people and nice. If you're bitter and a jerk, then people aren't going to respect you. And there may be a time when you find yourself, even if you're on top of the world, you may be suddenly backed into a corner where nobody wants to work with you because you're a jerk. You don't ever want to be one of those people. You always want to be the person that is good to work with.
Nice. Nice. This is a fire episode. I got one more question before we wrap it
Yeah.
up. In the radio business, TV business, media, um, on your view, how would you say, how do you get people to take you serious?
Do you mean like what do you mean like people serious? Like people that aren't like listeners or just people in general?
Just people in general.
I think you just have to really, it's the way you brand it. If you brand this as just a job for, the kid right out of college who wants to spin some records, obviously that's not really a thing. But if you brand yourself as, a voice of the public, a voice of an organization, a voice of a generation, a voice of a movement, that's when people take you seriously. I'm a goofball by trade. I've been a goofball my entire life. I try to find humor in as much as possible. Sometimes, a little more than probably necessary, but it's maintaining a balance. You don't want to be the days of shock jocks are kind of over where, playing fart noises on the air and all that stuff. It's just not really, nobody's going to take that seriously. But if you're somebody who's always thinking, how can I make this the most professional thing as possible? That's what you do. And you have to evolve. That's the other thing, is that you have to evolve with the technology, with the trends. For example, 25 years ago, you could probably do a story on the air that was like 2 minutes long and people would stick around for it. Now you got like 7 seconds to get that person's attention. And if you don't get it, they're out. And if they don't come back, you just lost a quarter hour of your ratings, which can be detrimental. So you have to think, I have a 15-year-old stepdaughter, and obviously I'm not going to speak like her, but you kind of have to figure out, okay, how's the younger generation thinking? How do they interpret things? You need to stay up on TikTok. You need to stay up on Snapchat. Even if you don't use it yourself, you got to know what it is, why it works, and use it to your advantage. If you're in radio and you don't have social media, or if you're like, oh, I don't do that, that's a big red flag, because that's basically you're leaving opportunity on the table to reach a whole other audience that may not even listen to your radio station. That's the thing, and if you own, they told me back in college, they were like, buy your own name as a website. I have owned danhardee.com since 2004. I own danhardee.net, like everything else, buy your name and everything, because you should own it. Go to every social media handle, buy your name, because you don't want anyone else capitalizing on your name for any reason. And if it looks like, if you're very well organized, it looks professional and people will take you seriously. You just always have to stand out and look like, that you know what you're doing. Fake it till you make it too. If you look like this massive personality who's got all these followers and maybe you're kind of green, they might take a chance on you just because you look. It's all about the perception. If you look like a big deal, then you are a big deal. And then once you get the job, you got to actually, walk the walk. But it can be done. And a lot of people do it. Just like you said earlier, you got to master every format. You learn how to do country, learn how to do top 40. Top 40 is the one format I've never done, only because I think I've always sounded a little older than I am. And so even when I was 22, I was on a station that was aimed for like 40-year-olds, and I just never did the top 40 thing. But, if you work in top 40 radio now, be thinking about how you're going to make that transition to the hot AC or the AC or the classic rock station. Think about how you're going to do that, because it's a very different format. You grow up, basically. Top 40 is typically that's where you start. That's the flame throwing, the crazy bits, the stories. As you age, you have to age with the format that you're on as well. And eventually you will get aged out of the format. But the good thing is there's a lot of formats. So you go from top 40 to AC to classic rock and stuff like that. And, then you just kind of move along your career with the industry. And I think we're entering a new time, because there's not a lot of new talent coming up in radio. A lot of Gen Zers, excuse me. Well, there's a lot of great ones that I've worked with and we employ. The majority of Gen Zers don't really have the same work ethic that we millennials grew up with. They kind of expect to be paid $100 grand right out of college. They don't really believe in, they're more focused on the work-life balance, which is okay. But when you're starting out, it's kind of like boot camp. You got to think, what's boot camp? Boot camp is awful. Like when you're in the military, it's not fun. You don't sleep much. Radio is kind of like that. Radio and TV are like that when you're starting out. It's kind of like boot camp. You have to put up with some things that you don't really want to do. You don't really make very much money. You have to humble yourself. You have to cancel that date you had planned with your girlfriend to go run the board at the radio station because something blew up. You have to make those sacrifices when you're starting out. Just like boot camp. Boot camp's a sacrifice. Radio's the same way. But if you do that, you're going to stand out from most people because most Gen Zers aren't like that. Most Gen Zers are like, oh, 9 to 5, I'm out. That's it. That's not how broadcasting works. If you go and you do above and beyond, you're already going to be ahead of the crowd. So I think there's an opportunity now because there's not a lot of people getting into the business, that the ones that are still getting into it or the ones that are green in it are just going to rise up. You just have to be able to navigate the business, the politics, the timing, know about the trades, the trends, all things that are happening, know about what's happening with the major companies. The more you become a walking Wikipedia page of radio, the more you're going to last in this business and you'll enjoy it too.
Nice. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Dan.
Yes, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And anyone who wants to reach out, I am at Dan Hardee on everything with 2 E's. I love to coach talent. I love to help with air checks. I love to, take a look at people's resumes. Whatever I can do to make this business better. That's what I'm all about. My email address is dan@danhardee.com. And that's with 2 E's, dan@danhardee.com. So anyone watching, please reach out. I would love to meet you and help make this business a little more fun.
All right, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Holden. I appreciate it. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, that's it.
Cool.
I'll be promoting this like crazy.
Sounds great, man. Well, thank you again for the opportunity, and please let me know if there's anything else I can do for you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. You too.